The Independent Power Producers Association of India, popularly known as IPPAI, is one of the oldest non-profit organizations providing a neutral platform to stimulate public discourse in the power and energy infrastructure realm.
IPPI is working in the area of trying to bring together on a neutral platform various diverse parts of the power sector, players, stakeholders, government, private sector, state, central, etc. We bring them together in the form of dialogues, discussion, debates to look at issues that need resolution, and we play the role of, shall we say, a neutral mediator, where people who come to these conferences are able to meet regulators, judicial authorities, government officials and others in an informal environment and share their thoughts.
IPPAI hosts an annual flagship event titled Regulators and Policymakers Retreat. The event, now in its 16th year, was held in Goa recently.
We have a very interesting theme which talks about the epochal shift in the idea of India. And we've had some amazing speakers from across the world, and they've basically shared various points of view. Particularly, this becomes relevant in the context of the fact that we have got now a very large population of young people with aspirations, and meeting those aspirations is the challenge.
This year's theme was on epochal shift in the idea of India meeting aspirations. The three-day event witnessed a combination of speeches, panel discussions and seminars on how the private power players can participate further in the India growth story.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk about a general subject, and the subject is the epochal shift in the idea of India meeting aspirations. While we can talk about India, but a lot of what we say about India is about the developing world. And just some numbers, 7 point some odd billion people on the planet, large part of it is the developing world. So meeting their aspirations is not just Indian people's aspirations, but aspirations globally. The epochal shift in the idea continues to remain an enigma. I suggest, ladies and gentlemen, let the deliberations begin. Without further ado, may I now invite Mr. Blackrock.
Thank you very much, Harry. It is always important that when discussing initiatives, new projects, investment potentials, that profit is not the sole motive of a business or development venture. That people, and especially those most vulnerable, are the human capital that we should aspire to enhance. Thus, the reflection of a nation's success is not benchmarked by the profits generated in the private sector, nor the extravagant displays of wealth so often exhibited by the few. Rather, a nation's success should be measured by the living standards, the opportunities to progress educationally, culturally, and socially. A nation's success should be measured by the consensus of contentment that exists amongst its masses. India has the opportunity to lead the way and to set international benchmarks and models of excellence, if only those in industry, you the regulators, you the policymakers, and you the thinkers seated in this room will grasp that vision and accept that challenge. Thank you very much.
I now request Mr. Tilotia, the man who wrote the book, The Making of India. Tell us, what have we made?
Thank you and good evening. I talk a lot more about how maybe we should embrace the market somewhat more, and maybe that is something that we are not doing in India already or currently. There is still a huge amount of inequality in power because there are a lot of people who simply cannot afford power, and we've never treated the citizens as consumers of this. We have not empowered them to have the purchasing power to reach out and have this power. Now, we are now in a situation where we are talking about direct benefit transfers, etc. But let me try and exemplify how we could potentially think of this story differently. And what attracted my attention and what has been of big news today over the last couple of days has been these big announcements of 2 lakh, 3 lakh crores being given out to people in Bihar as part of the election packages over the next 5 years. Many of these, most of this money in some sense will go in investments in infrastructure. This infrastructure will again not yield the set of returns that the government expects it to get simply because the consumers will not have the ability to pay for this infrastructure. If we could convert our citizens by transferring some of this money to them as consumers and then get power companies, education companies, other companies, etc., to go and fight for that share of pie that reaches out to that consumer, potentially it reinvigorates the entire system. But we just need to empower our citizens as financially empowered consumers. And I think if that is a discussion that we can move towards in many of these public goods, and power being one of the key components, we start with Bijli, I think that would have been some sort of a good achievement. Thank you.
May I now request our political friend to give us the political perception, the Honorable Deputy Chief Minister and the Power Minister from Jammu and Kashmir, to share his thoughts. So.
Thank you very much. In this highly technical conclave, I think various experts will focus on various aspects. But what I experience, I'll only reflect on that. When I was remembering that why the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Spanish, the English, the French, they came to India. Because we know that India was the highly developed economy in those days. And ultimately, when they came over here, and what they did, I won't go into the history. In 1850s and the mid-19th century, we see that our economy was at par with the Japanese economy. That was the situation. But where we were when we got freedom, and what were the challenges? We were very much influenced by socialism, capitalism, and I think that that was the reason that our economy, our society, our polity, whatever it experienced, we didn't went to our roots, and that's why we are in a fix even today. And now the time has come when we can look forward, because it's a turning point. What I feel in Indian history, it's a turning point. And we have to, the policymakers, the regulators, the policymakers, they have to look at this, that how we can fit in our experience of our old generations into the new economic policy, new thinking. And that's the area on which we have to focus. बहुत-बहुत शुक्रिया.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, for the finale, we have the one and only Suhail Seth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members on the dais. I think we're living in some of the most troubled times ever. We have economic imperatives to deal with. We have political imperatives to deal with. We have citizenry imperatives to deal with. There is no India today. It's a misnomer. There's a guy who's fighting for Bihar. You see language that is debased, that is depraved at the highest echelons of our political leadership. You have people who are representing states and couldn't be bothered about the Union of India. The idea of India is missing because the idea of nationalism has escaped us. We have replaced national issues with regional parochial issues. The bureaucracy and the political nexus, the ability to decide for themselves independently, has also hurt the idea of India. What has equally hurt the idea of India is we have injected politics into every element of our lives. We have injected into the way we report news. We have injected it into the way we ally with businesses. We are promoting brand India. But what brand do you promote if the Indian in India doesn't believe in the idea of India? I have great, great hope that some of the changes that are being set in motion today, some compulsorily, some, of your own volition by this present government, will bode and augur well for the India of tomorrow. The India of tomorrow is not going to wait for its politicians anymore. There is going to be an immediacy, an alacrity, and there's going to be impatience. Governments can handle patient citizens. Impatient citizens are a dangerous lot. I think we need to set a benchmark for finishing work. We need to migrate as a government from slogans to delivery. The citizen of today is more than ever ready to bring about an inflection in the idea of India. But for that, you will have to recalibrate the aspirations of present-day Indians. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it was a great start. Thank you so much for being a great audience, great panel. Round of applause. May I invite both of you, Heiko and Devda, to please come up and share your thoughts on the epical shift of India. Devdutt, it's all yours. Go ahead.
I think the idea of India currently, if there is one thing which is happening, and you can see it in social media, is that nobody's listening to the other. We have stopped listening. Everybody has a voice, and everybody wants to speak and present an opinion, but nobody's listening. And that's an idea to think about. India is a diverse country. It is an extremely complicated country. And anyone who believes that one solution will solve all our problems is really not a very intelligent man or woman. And there's something that we have to keep in mind. So when somebody imagines one idea of India, so what works for an extremely affluent man may not work for an extremely poor man. If you're below the poverty line, your aspirations are very different from someone who has lived abroad, educated abroad, and has decided to come to India to save the poor people. So if you ask the judiciary, they will say, we are working for the poor in India. If you ask the bureaucracy, they'll say, we are working for the poor in India. You talk to the politician, he'll say, we are making poor for India. You talk to entrepreneurs, they're saying, we are creating opportunities for the poor in India. Really? You talk to an app developer in Bangalore, and they'll say, I'm trying to create opportunities for the poor. And that's a dangerous idea, because you saying it is very different from doing it. The question is of, do we have a churn or a tug of war? There are two forces at work, the force and the counterforce. So the force and the counterforce don't talk to each other. They hate each other, but they're made to churn. And one has to understand what is the difference between the two. In tug of war, both are pulling simultaneously till one wins or the rope snaps. And that is what an argument or a vivad is, where either my way or your way, either or. But the moment you say manthan or churn, you are saying that my idea till an expiry point, till a point, is then when I stop your idea, then when you stop my idea, and therefore we churn. Force, counterforce, force, counterforce, force, counterforce. This is what keeps coming. Now look at how people talk. Do they have a tug of war session in the parliament, or is there a churn and a counter churn? A force and a counterforce. What is going on in the parliament? It is tug of war, because each one believes in one idea, monotheism / fascism. My God is true, your God is false. My idea is true, your idea is false. Churn is, well, both our ideas have merit. Let's use each one of them till we get it just right. So if there is a shift in the idea of India, it is that we have moved towards a tug of war. We need to move towards a churn, because unless you churn, the milk will not yield butter. And you have to ask yourself these fundamental questions rather than enjoying rooster fights. So I hope the rest of the day is spent churning with many ideas and appreciating that everybody who speaks brings something of value. Thank you.
Very interesting presentation, Dev. Very thought-provoking, as usual. Can we have Heiko?
We're talking about is a raising awareness within the population, not only in Britain or America or in India, but on a world scale. How can finance, information, and communications as decisive levers of economic and thereby of political power be transformed into something else? I believe that it is possible to take the banks on a global scale into public ownership, and if they're not taken into public ownership, to create in national states banks which are serving the public need and thereby accumulating resources from private sector banks into state sector banks. Information. I think there are two aspects to it. One is you can turn around and say, okay, you could say something like we would nationalize one aspect of one private software company, or we would break up software companies or internet companies that have too much power. Or alternatively, you could turn around and say we will provide large-scale state support at all levels, from microfinance to large-scale finance, for software companies that are designed to produce software for public use. The reorganization of how the world is organized between consumer and producer can be and should be and will be determined by how we take control and organize communications across the world into the future. And I would prefer that we think carefully about how we structure the utilization of technology and information and communications now in order to seize control of these things for the public good, so that the people control what is done with the technology and resources of the future, rather than corporate interests grabbing and utilizing our information, our knowledge, our ideas for their purposes. That, I believe, is essential in order to create the foundations for a better society which we can live in. Thanks.
Myself,
The event witnessed a panel discussion on the epochal shift in the idea of India and featured some eminent personalities from different fields of expertise.
we're still thinking of war. We still haven't had the idea, the whole idea itself of India, of the epochal change that is being perceived. I ask myself if there is an epochal change in our country, if something is happening in our country, and we are, all of us, committed to that, and there are many attributes that we see that represent that remarkable change that's happening in our country for the good. But I ask myself and I ask all of you, what kind of country are we if we still thirst for blood? Each other's? Blood of our neighbors, blood of somebody else. This country doesn't seem to know how awful nuclear war can be. I still have somebody sitting next to me 2 days ago who said, and he was a lawyer, this was in the bar room of the Delhi High Court, and he said, Bhai Sahab, ek dafa sabak sikha do Pakistan ko. And I said, tell me how. We've been looking for this for a long time. He said, ek dafa nuclear bomb dal do un par. Now, how does anyone explain to someone what a nuclear bomb is about? So, we are still thinking of war. We still haven't had enough of war. No subject that 50 years ago traumatized this country is today a matter of the past. What we saw in terms of social ugliness of 50 years ago, we see today once again in the CARP movement. We see once again in honor killings. We see once again in how women are being treated in this country. No law has made a difference. No speeches have made a difference. No political parties have made a difference. And finally, the whole idea of politics as war and not politics as competition. This is what worries me. So I wish there was an epochal change in our country. Unfortunately, we seem to be on the verge of such a change, but there is something here that holds us back, keeps us back, and prevents us from being able to make that change. I hope here over the 3 days in these beautiful surroundings in Goa, we can at least find some way of addressing what is it that keeps us back from making that remarkable, fantastic change that is waiting to happen, which is inviting us and which really we deserve. Thank you very much.
पिछले 60-65 साल के इतिहास में हम दो चीज़ों के लिए हमेशा चिंतित रहते हैं। एक तो कहते हैं कि गरीबी हटा देना है, गरीबों का मतलब एबोलिशन हो जाना चाहिए, और दूसरा जो बड़ा मुद्दा है वो किसानों का मुद्दा है। दो बड़े मुद्दे हैं जो कि हमेशा 1952 से लेकर आज तक राजनीति को हमेशा प्रभावित करते रहे। और इसका कारण जो सबसे बड़ा दिखाई देता है मुझे कि हम एक वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड की तरफ जो है, एक पाश्चात्य संस्कृति की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं। हमको अपने देश के बारे में ही नहीं पता है। तो मैं ये कहता हूं कि ये देश नारों में चल रहा है, और इस देश में जो सही सोच है कि गरीब के लिए हम किस तरह से सुविधा क्रिएट कर पाएं, हम किस तरह से इंडियन कल्चर के साथ लोगों को जोड़ पाएं, और इस देश को आगे बढ़ाने में कैसे हम आगे जा सकते हैं, उस सोच की कमी इसलिए है कि हम लोग अपने से ऊपर उठकर, अपने स्वार्थ से ऊपर उठकर सोचने का प्रयास नहीं करते हैं। और जब तक नहीं करेंगे तब तक ये हिंदुस्तान जो है हिंदुस्तान नहीं हो सकता।
What kind of epochal shift we looking for India? Are we looking a global economic power or a regional military power? On which measures you want to look at India in the new era? In my view, we should look at it. The young India, as we talking about, involve and engaging the millions of young Indians, giving them equal opportunities, giving them to grow for their brighter future, giving an health facilities and affordable health facilities to every citizen of India, using the human resources, protecting the natural resources of this great nation. Are we talking about one country? When we talk about one country, are we ignoring those 14% of the minority population? Over 66 years of independence, are we giving equal opportunity to them for them to grow? Or are we giving a sense of security feeling among them that we are one? Or you are part of our own country? So we proud of our country, we're proud of our religion, we're proud of our culture, and we're proud of oneness. And I believe together we can build a nation we're proud of. Thank you.